don't quit when you don't pass the audition, when you're told no, because if you quit when you're told no, when you're told it's not your time, not you right now, if you quit then, it was never your dream to begin with. Welcome back to The Samantha Show. I'm your host, Samantha. You can call me Sam. Just don't call me Sammy. And today's guest, I have been chasing. We have been trying to set this up forever. And you wouldn't think it'd be that hard because we are sister queens. I'm here with Morgan Murchland. She's our Miss Ohio for America Strong. But maybe that is why I'm chasing you, because we're just so busy, Morgan, doing all the queen things.
It's been a crazy year.
It really, really has. And I want to talk to you about a little bit about the pageant stuff. But, I'm really have you here today because you're a badass. Like,
Thank you.
Period. So Morgan is a certified firefighter. She's a paramedic. She has worked full time, but now she's doing it part time. She's on an anesthesiologist team. Mm-hmm. She's all around. She's the kind of person, like, if you have to be in like a catastrophic like disaster area, like you want Morgan with you. I realized that very early on, like when I found out what you did, and then we were like traveling to Vegas together and stuff. I was like, I feel so much safer with Morgan around.
Yes. Yeah.
So Morgan, I want to talk to you about how you get into this field, what it's like. You obviously work with like a lot of men, so I want to dive into all of that. But before we get into that, can you just give me a little bit of background, a little bit about yourself, what it is that you do, and what inspired you to kind of pursue this career in firefighting, paramedics, and all of this?
Yes. So I grew up, both of my parents were police officers, actually. So that's how they met. They met on the job. They always like to joke and say that they met in jail. When people don't know what they actually did, they were police officers. That's how they met in jail. So I grew up in that atmosphere, and I just kind of fell in love with first responding. And I actually originally thought that I wanted to be like my mom and be this female police officer. But I was like, I can't wait till I'm 21. Like, this has been my dream since I was like a little girl. But I knew I could be a firefighter once I turned 18. So I started off in the fire academy at 16 years old doing a high school program, and just immediately fell in love with that side of things. I realized I had a passion for the medical field, and so EMS fit perfectly into that. I love the physical challenge that firefighting brought. And so I really fell in love with it right then and knew that that's exactly what I wanted to do. So I graduated. I actually graduated high school early so I could start my job. So I graduated in December of 2019, and I got my high school diploma, and I was a firefighter EMT then as well. So yeah, and it actually worked out perfectly because I started my first job working as an EMT right when the COVID pandemic happened, which was crazy. But they needed it, and that's part of why I kind of pushed to graduate early so I could start my job. And so and it's crazy now, I'm 23, and so I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, I was so young. I started this crazy career field in probably the craziest time for anyone to start in healthcare. And it's just insane when I look back at things, but it really did. It forced me to grow up in a lot of ways, but it was an amazing start to my job, and it just kind of ignited that passion that I had for the career.
Yeah, so you have, I love your relationship with your mom.
Yes.
Mama, it's Holly, right?
Yeah,
Mama Holly.
Pageant
Mama. Like, I always kind of count on her to be there too for me. Yes. Like, kind of always like comfort blanket for me too at all of our events, having her there. Yeah. But that's amazing that you have this really strong woman leader. I mean, we all look at our moms as, or most of us, I think, look at our moms as people that we look up to and those who believe in us and pave the way for us. But truly, when you're talking about having a woman in this really male-dominated field and first responder environment, a police officer, you have your mom to look up to you. What was that like growing up, or what do you remember about having a mom as a police officer? I mean, you got two parents, which is like kind of crazy.
I know.
But maybe in comparison than that, what was it like having a mom in that field?
Yeah. It was crazy. And I always joke, and I'm like, our house was known as not the house to throw a party at in high school.
Right. No.
Not parents. We weren't the fun house. But my mom, my mom was the first female supervisor at both of the departments she worked at.
Wow.
So she became, at Kettering, she became the first female sergeant, and then she promoted to lieutenant. She was the first female lieutenant. And then she went to Westerville and became the first female police chief that they've had. So, I grew up watching that, and my mom's strength and as well as her leadership, that's something I still look up to. She's a good leader. Like she loves her people. And I kind of, they don't always see that side of her, but I do, you know, because I'm with her, I'm at home with her, and she loves her people and she just does a really amazing job. And so she was such an inspiration for me and helped encourage me too, you know, as I was entering this male dominated career field. It really helped me to have someone be like, you know what, my mom did this. Like my mom gets this struggle. She was the first female at her department, so she had to break those barriers.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. So what was it like entering fire service as a woman, or, you know, getting on a team, I'm guessing primarily made up of men,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's that like going into that environment or stepping, especially to your point, like you brought up something that I hadn't even thought of when I was getting into this conversation, how young you were too. Like, I think, you know, as we get older as women, we really gain our confidence and we can assert ourselves, but that's tough as a young woman too.
It was crazy, and it was a challenge that, you know, I thought I knew what that was going to be like because I saw my mom. And really, and we still talk about this all the time, like law enforcement is definitely still very male dominated and very behind the times. But even my mom will say nothing like the fire department. Nothing like the fire department. The fire department is probably a solid 50 years behind law enforcement when it comes to their culture. And so I thought I knew the challenge and what it was going to be like. I had no idea. I had no idea at all how hard it was going to be. And especially, you know, one of the departments I worked at, I was the only female there. And they had females in the past, but at that time I was the only one who was there. And so and I was 18 when I worked at that department. And so I was still so young, and I went through this journey really my first few years in the career where my self-confidence was just like bashed, because you're right, as a young woman, like you really haven't formed that yet. Like you don't know who you are yet. You're still learning those things, and having to learn those things in the firehouse was just such a journey for me. And I share this story a lot. Anyone who knows this, because it was like this turning point in my career. And I was 19 years old at the time. I was in paramedic school, and I call it the taco bar story. And basically, you know, I'm sitting with these guys, and I had been told, like, I'm stupid, I shouldn't be here, like, I was wasting my time because I was in paramedic school, and they're like, you're too dumb to do that, you should just quit now. Like, there's no way that you're gonna be able to finish medic school. And so I really was like, I should just quit. Like, I'm making a fool of myself. Like, who am I to think that I could do this job? Like, what am I thinking? And I looked up to these guys, you know? And so, like, when they said those things about me, like, I believed it. And I believed I was too stupid to do this job. And I had this moment, and I was sitting there, and I was working a different unit day than what I normally work. So it wasn't like the regular crew that I had. And so they were talking with each other after dinner, and they were talking about, they wanted to do this, like, shift crew hangout with each other. And they're like, let's do a taco bar. And I'm just, you know, I'm like a silent observer because, you know, it's not my crew. So they're just talking about it. And they're sitting there, and they're like, okay, well, how much taco meat are we going to need for like a taco bar? Like a pound of ground beef per person? and then someone else pipes up and is like, well, my wife is on keto, so like that's all she'll eat is like taco meat. So like she should probably count as like 1.5 people. And then someone else is like, well, my kids are coming. They're not going to count as like one person. So they're getting out like pens and paper, like they're doing math equations right now, trying to figure out how much ground beef they should buy. And they're like, okay, well, how are we going to split up the cost of this? Should we all just like, should we just send someone to the store and then like we split it up after that, or like should we each all just individually buy things? And like at this point they're fighting, like they're getting heated, like someone has to like leave the room, take a lap around the bay, because they're fighting with each other over these tacos. And so the solution that they came up with was that we all got in the fire engine at 10 p.m. at night, drove to Kroger in the fire truck. They all went in, individually bought their different things that they were going to bring to this party. We went back to the firehouse. They all put it in the fridge, you know, and then we finished out our shift, and then they all individually took it home with them the next day and then brought it back to the one guy's house that they were having this taco bar party at. And I'm telling you, like, it was like 10 p.m. at night, I'm sitting there, and it was like this epiphany. Like, I was like, what? I'm believing these guys who just bought 20 pounds of ground beef at the store and fought for 3 hours with each other about tacos. Like, I'm believing them when they tell me I'm too stupid to do this job. And, you know, it was less about them. Like, they had their little taco party, and they had a grand old time. And more about, like, why am I believing other people
Yes.
when they say these things about me. Like, I'm not too stupid to do this job, you know? And it really was a turning point for me. I was like, you know what? I don't care what they say about me. Like, they can think that I'm too stupid, but I know that I'm good enough and I'm qualified and I can do this job. And, you know, I graduated medic school. I didn't drop out, even though they told me to do that. And so that was a really big lesson for me that, like, you don't have to listen to what other people say about you. You know, like you can hear it and just let it go out the other ear. Like, it doesn't matter what they think about you. It matters what you think about you.
That's so beautiful. And that's a hilarious story about trying to put together a taco bar. I love too that you just kind of sat and observed the whole thing go down.
I was like, at this, like, please let me just like fix this for you. You don't need 20 pounds of ground beef for 8 people.
We don't. And, you know, I was talking about this. I thought about this not long ago, Morgan, this idea that I do think we see when we get older. But so often in life, we put people on pedestals because we do respect them, or we do look up to them, or they are our superiors, or they have been labeled the boss, or they have the title. And then it's like when you get to sit with them and either observe them trying to hold a taco party or interact with them, you're like, oh, we are all on the same playing field, mostly speaking, you know, but nobody is, everything to your point is like what you believe about yourself, and nobody else should be able to dictate and tell you what you can and cannot do. And no one should have that liberty to do so, and nobody is in that position of power to tell you that you are what you believe yourself to be. So I think that that's such a great message. Were there times getting into this that you felt like because you were a woman that you had to prove yourself more than maybe your male counterparts?
Yeah, for sure. You know, I struggled a lot culturally because I found that the fire department was at the point where they would accept women, but that you had to be the kind of woman they wanted.
Right.
And that wasn't me, you know? Like, I love wearing makeup, and genuinely it's because I love doing it. Like, it's just peaceful for me to do it. And that's what I like to do, like, period. Like, I like wearing makeup, so I'm going to do it. And, you know, I was pulled aside, like, multiple times and was like, you need to stop with that. Like, no one's going to take you seriously. And I got that feedback from, like, 2 groups of people. I got it from one group that was genuinely like, hey, this is why people aren't taking you seriously, and trying to help me out. And then I got it from another group of people who just wanted to discourage me. And so it was repeatedly told to me, like, everybody thinks that, like, you're stupid and you can't do this job because of the way you look, and, like, you need to stop with the femininity, like, you know, at least try to fit in. And for me, like, my personality, I was like, I'm pushing back more. Like, I'm wearing fake eyelashes now to work. You know, because I'm like, how I look has nothing to do with my qualifications and how good I can do the job. That should be the only thing that matters. And that's what I tell people. Like, I had the same exact physical fitness standards that I had to pass as the men who do this job. I took the same tests. Like, you know, I did everything to prove myself, but yet I was always thought of as less qualified. You know, I was always made the joke of, like, you know, I was the DEI hire. I was, you know, they just hired me because of how I looked and to check a box. And, you know, that's so unfair, I think, for a lot of women who are wanting to do this job, because we really do. It's like we went to the same school, we passed the same tests, you know, we had the same interviews. So that's really frustrating. And so there was a lot of times where I felt like I wasn't taken seriously because of that. But at the end of the day, like, and I see a lot of women in the fire service do this too. I feel like they diminish themselves, like, to try and fit in. And they don't express themselves. And I don't feel like that's really doing anything for any of the females that want to join the fire service in the future. You know, I think for me, I chose to be like, no, this is who I am and I'm here. And I'm going to fight for this. And I think that as women, that's kind of what we have to do. Like, we have to stand up for ourselves and not allow the pressures that we're feeling from the people who are pushing back on us to dictate, you know, how we express ourselves or who we are as a person.
You know, this reminds me of that picture you have that just my favorite picture of you ever. And I think it's like you're like glammed up in like the pageant stuff, but you have like the fire helmet too with you in it. Yeah. I love that photo. I'm going to use that photo with your permission, or whoever took its permission as the graphic for this, because to your point, that's such a powerful image that you can be both. And we've talked about that when we were talking a little bit about, you know, kind of pageantry and what you do and things like that. Little side note here, because you were talking about the physical test. What kind of physical test do you have to go through to be a firefighter? What does that look like?
Yeah, so you have to obviously first become a firefighter, like certify, take the test, everything like that. So with that, everyone kind of has the same thing. You have like a written exam, then you have practicals that you train for. So you're carrying those ladders, you're throwing them, you know, you have to drag a victim out of a house, search and rescue, like different things like that are the practicals you have to pass. So that's to be able to certify. And then as far as getting on a department, it does vary. So like some departments have, they call it the firefighter mile, and that's the one that a lot of like Columbus uses, a lot of departments do. And it's basically like a physical test that kind of like mocks what the job would be like. So you wear like a 75-pound vest, and you go through kind of like this course that's laid out. So like sledgehammer, like you're throwing a sledgehammer, you're dragging a dummy, you're carrying stuff, all while wearing the 75-pound vest. You're doing stair climbs in that. So it is challenging. And then, you know, in each department varies. Like some of them create their own little, you know, test that they do. That's kind of like a version, but everything's a version of that.
Sure.
And so it is a challenge, and it is like, frankly, it is hard for females. Like I'm so transparent about that because naturally we don't have the same level of upper body strength that men typically do, and that's a lot of what it is. But I've always said this, like, you just have to learn how to do things your way, and you can't. Like, it is so completely capable for women to do this job, but like for me, that meant it took me a little bit longer. You know what I mean? Like I couldn't, because I'm shorter, I couldn't just grab the ladder off the rack like some of the guys did and carry it on my shoulder like how they did. So that means I had to take the time to be like, okay, how am I going to do this for me? And I still pass those tests. Like that's the bottom line. And I think people don't realize that when they see females in the fire service. They're like, oh, well, they just had like a little cheater way of being able to do things. And it's like, no, just because I do something differently doesn't mean it's wrong. Like I'm still doing it, and sometimes I'm quicker, you know? Like,
yes,
that's just how it is. Yeah. So you have to learn, and it was a learning curve for me because I was a gymnast growing up. So like everything I did, I was strong, and I had a lot of like cardiovascular endurance, but I never lifted weights. And so that was a learning curve for me. Like, how do I lift with my legs? Like everything I do that guys can do with their upper body, I found a way for me to like transfer that to my legs because my legs are strong. So that's kind of how you have to do that, I think, as a female, but it's completely doable.
Have you heard the book, The Fourth Wing?
Oh yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah, yeah.
I'm reading it right now, and the main character, she's like a tiny female, and she talks so much about these physical tests that she has to do, but to your point, does them in a different way, but achieves the same result. And it's just, you know, using your skill set, quickness, and, you know, some other things that, and maybe some brain power in some ways too, you know, what's the most logical way and stuff like that. But that's amazing. Just hearing about all the stuff you have to do, like, again, gives me anxiety. I was not cut out for paramedic frontline firefighting, but I'm glad that there are people like you who are. And what advice would you give to other women who were interested in pursuing careers as a first responder, or maybe even specifically firefighting?
Persistence. That's my biggest thing. And that's what I had to learn. Like literally the mindset of I will not give up. I will not give up. And I had to lean on that a lot in fire school. Because I mean, I had a lot of things stacked against me, like my size, my strength, you know, and really people not wanting me to be there, like including my instructor. I literally had an instructor that was like, I don't think women should be in the fire service. And so I didn't have a lot of support. I did have some supportive people, and that's what, like, I think we have a really good community of females in the fire service. Like, we get each other, we get the struggle. So I'm always eager to help someone else out who's in kind of the place that I was in when you're learning these things. But it's the mindset of like, I will not give up. And truly, my persistence is what carried me through all of that. And when I think about it too, I think it's now a strength of mine because, like, maybe compared to some of my coworkers, like, this was never easy for me. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't easy for me from the very first day. And so now when things, like, when you're on scene and things don't go to plan, because, like, there's always room for errors, you know? I'm used to that. Like, I'm like, all right, how are we going to adapt? You know, because that's the mindset that I had to instill in myself from the very start. So now when I'm using that skill, you know, in my career of adaptability, like, I think it's honestly helped me a lot.
That makes a lot of sense. And I can see how that would be so translatable to other aspects of your life because you've been able to achieve this and been able to do this. And I like hearing too that you said, even though it maybe is a small group, that women are eager to support other women in this field. And I talked to our Jackie, who won Miss America Strong from North Carolina, because she works in NASCAR. And she talked about how, there too is like this line of women who want to help other women rise up in these male dominated fields, which I think is so beautiful.
Yes.
So talk to me a little bit now. Let's just transition into talking about some of the mental bearing and weight that these first responder roles carry, and what are some of the biggest challenges you've seen or faced in this field related to kind of mental health and well-being?
Yeah. So right now, like, suicide is actually one of the leading causes of death for firefighters, which is crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, we're losing more people to suicide than we are like actual line of duty deaths. And so that's tragic to me. And I think we're at a point now in our career where we recognize that issue. Like, we recognize PTSD and depression and all of these things are impacting our members. But I think the biggest contributing factor of that is actually culture. And that's where a lot of people disagree with me. I think we're doing it to ourselves, quite frankly, until we recognize that. Because if you think about it, now we've recognized this problem for years, but the numbers continue to rise. They just continue to get higher and higher. And I think it's because we're not actually addressing the problem, which is our culture.
Is it this idea of like, you have to be mentally tough to do this? There's no room for emotion and upset, like all that. Like, it's this forced, contain, put on the face, do the job.
Very much so. And if you're identified as somebody who is like, hey, I'm struggling, it's like, well, then you need to leave. You're weak. You can't do this job. And they kind of get like socially isolated. And I experienced a lot of that. And especially I felt like as a woman, like, I felt like I couldn't because everyone was expecting me to not be able to handle this job.
Right.
And so that kind of added a pressure. And, I will say specifically, I think we've done a really bad job with the resources we provide others. Like, I remember when I was struggling and it was like, I'm looking at like, okay, like what can I do to go get help for this? And I saw, they're starting to become like first responder things, you know what I mean? To try to help with this, like retreats, mental health support, all of it was geared towards men. Like, I remember reaching out to certain groups and retreats and being like, hey, can I do this? And being like, oh, we're sorry, like, this is like a male cohort thing, Wow. And it was like, they just don't have the resources for women. And I think that that's honestly really tragic. And it's something that we have to grow. And if we want to see more women join this profession, they have to know that there's support out there for them when they join the profession.
So what does a woman do? Where do they go? How did you get help or resources, or how do you unload that mental weight that you carry?
Yeah. So for me, like, therapy was huge in that, and I had to find the right kind of therapist, and I'm big on that. I think even if you're not actively struggling, it's unrealistic for you to think like you're going to make it through your entire year your entire career without some sort of struggle, and so develop those habits now. And that's something I wish I would have done, and especially being so young going into the career. I was 18 years old. Like, I had no like emotional skill set whatsoever. And that's typical for someone who's younger, but then you're throwing in that additional layer of like, I'm seeing all of this trauma, I'm going through all these stressful situations. And so that's something I'm huge on, is like, start now, start earlier in your career, finding healthy coping mechanisms. And a lot of our issue, when I talk about like culturally, why I think that's such a contributing factor to the mental health crisis, is this was legitimately some of the like actual advice I got from my coworkers. It was like, if you're struggling, like, just go home, drink a few beers, 10 or 11 beers, like that was literally the advice, was like, drink or drink. Like, that's how we deal with this. Yeah. And that's such
I heard that on a podcast not long ago, that a lot of first responder police officers are heavy drinkers because that's how they're going home and just handling their stress, because these resources aren't available.
Yeah. And I mean this, like, I say this in a loving way, like, because I want to see this profession better, but I truly think the fire service is the most toxic profession there is. Not only is there the highest, suicide rates, we have the highest divorce rates of any profession. We have some of the highest domestic violence rates, some of the highest alcohol and drug abuse rates. And so it truly thrives off of like this toxic behaviors. And we have to get to a point where like, this isn't helping us. You know, like this isn't what is making us better. And so that was actually some of the advice I got was like, just start drinking, you know? And that's something I'm big on is like, find those healthy coping mechanisms. Like for me, it's working out, going on a run, like those things help me in therapy, talking about it with someone. Like, I don't think it's shameful to admit, hey, I'm struggling with this run. Like, I want to go and talk to someone. And I think we need to work on creating a culture that realizes that mental health isn't something that we should be ashamed of. You know, it really shouldn't be, because everyone struggles. And so what's the point of just hiding it? That does nothing for you.
I like how you said, set yourself up with a therapist from the beginning. I'm such a big believer in that in general, not even in first response. Yeah. Like, I have a therapist, and I remember the first time I met with her, she was like, what are your goals? I was like, just to have you in my back pocket. Yeah. Like I have nothing right now, but the same way I go to the gym, the same way I try to eat healthy, I want to establish a relationship with you. And I saw her every 2 weeks, and now it's a little more sporadic, but like she's there because that relationship is established. And to your point, it's like, I think we just need to normalize having that outlet and having that, you know, resource there. So I think that's so good and so important. So let's talk a little bit about pageantry as we wrap this up a little bit. But how do you think that, like, competing in Miss Ohio, and you've done also Ohio USA, I know, but how has competing in Miss Ohio America really influenced your confidence and your leadership skills, or maybe helped you find your voice and things like that?
Yeah. Oh, it's been instrumental in my growth as a person, for sure. You know, I think it kind of went back to when I first kind of had this idea of like, okay, I want to compete in a pageant. Like, obviously, I experienced a lot of backlash. Yeah. You know, in my profession, they really hated it. And it's still something that, like, I get made fun of.
Because you were in the fire department already, right? When you decided to do that. Yeah, that didn't go over well with the makeup and eyelashes.
And, you know, I still get made fun of for it. And I knew I was, like, whatever. You know, I knew that's how it was going to be. But it's been huge for me, just recognizing that, like, again, that idea of like, I'm not who others say I am, I'm who I say I am. And for me, that was expressing that. Like, that first time I competed in a pageant, like, I'll never forget when I walked out on stage, and it was like I had all this hate, I had all these negative things, and it was this moment of like, no, like, I'm doing this for me, and you know, I'm doing this because I felt like it was something God has called me to do, and so I'm gonna walk out on that stage with that confidence. And it's really been huge in growing my confidence and still pursuing a dream even though people don't understand it. Like, that's huge for me. You know, like, there's so many people who don't understand pageantry, who have a negative view of it, think it's really negative for women. I just want to be like, oh, you just don't understand, like, what it does for our confidence. And so that was a huge lesson for me of like, yeah, I can still go out there and do something that I want to do, even though people may not understand it. And that's okay. Like, they don't have to understand it because I get it.
Yes. I love it. I think it's amazing. I believe in that so fully. And I'm going to butcher this quote, but I've heard people say that thing where it's like, people can't always see where you're headed or see your end game because they weren't the one who had the dream or had the vision. And that's so true in this situation. Yeah. So as you're being Miss Ohio for America, what message do you hope to share with other young women throughout the rest of your reign, which is wrapping up way too soon?
Crazy. You know, for me, and this is a big part of why I started in pageantry, was truly, I wanted to show people that you can do both. Like, you can be in this male-dominated career field and do this job of, you know, whatever it is, this tough job, and you don't have to change your femininity. Like, my femininity is my strength. It really is. And it was just this expression of like, I can be a woman and I can be strong and I can wear makeup and that's who I am, and that's perfectly fine. And actually, that's my strength, is me embracing that feminine side of myself. And so that's really what I want to show and inspire young women, because I do think representation matters. And I remember when I was 15 and being like, okay, I think I want to, you know, maybe be a firefighter, and looking into the fire department and not seeing anyone, like not seeing barely any women, but specifically any women that I felt like represented me. And so I think that now that I am older and I'm in that role, like, I want girls and young women to see me and be like, okay, yeah, I can do this. Like, it's okay that I like the color pink. Like, I have a pink fire helmet. You know what I mean? Like, it's okay. Like, those are not things to be ashamed of, because those things make you you. And like, the world needs you in it specifically. And so that's really what I want to show people, is that you can do both, and that's actually a strength to be able to do both.
You actually have a pink fire helmet?
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Oh, yeah.
What a powerful message. What a powerful message, Morgan. And I have admired you since day one. Since Rick told me to pay attention to how you were moving and posing in your photos, because I was not doing it well. He's like, watch her. But have always just admired you. And just the more that I get to know you, the more that I love you. And I just think you're such a gift to this world, and the impact that you're making, not only as Miss Ohio, but as Morgan Murchland, the firefighter, the paramedic, the, anesthesiologist assistant, like whatever it is you do, I don't know, putting people under, all the things. So if you could leave this podcast episode with one final message to anybody, doesn't have to be to women or anybody listening, if you had one final moment with a mic in your hand, what would you say?
Oh, that's a good question. I would go back to, you're not who other people say you are. You are who you want to define yourself as. And that was such a hard lesson for me to learn, and it took time. But I think that it truly will impact your dreams, how you walk into a room, what career, you in your career field, whatever it is that you want to pursue. If you have that mentality of, it doesn't matter what other people say about me, it matters what I think of myself. And when I look in the mirror, am I proud of what's looking back at me? That's what matters at the end of the day. It doesn't matter what other people think of your dreams or your career or what you're doing in life. It matters what you think. And so don't let those negative things keep you down. It would have been really easy for me to be like, people don't think I can do this job. They think I'm too weak or too small. Like, let me just find something else. Let me find a different job that people are more accepting of that. But I didn't let that. And I can't think of how different my life would have been if I listened to those things. It really would have destroyed my dreams and my confidence. So don't let those things keep you from pursuing what your passion is, what your heart wants to do.
So well said. Well, thank you so much, Morgan. I'm so glad we were finally able to do this.
Me too.
Everybody who is listening, go after those dreams. Do what your heart desires, make your dreams a reality, and have a great day, because you deserve it.